1 minute ago, the sky became occupied territory. I want you to understand what I just said, because the words themselves feel inadequate for what has happened. Not approaching, not arriving, not detected on approach trajectory with time to prepare and analyse and convene panels of experts. 1 minute ago, at 23:58 Universal Coordinated Time on January 4th, 2026, every tracking screen at Vandenberg Space Force Base turned red simultaneously. Every conjunction warning system in the space surveillance network triggered at once. And an object that was 200 million kilometres away 12 hours ago is now 35,786 kilometres above our heads. It is directly over the Americas. It is not moving. It is parked. And 3 of our satellites are tumbling out of control. I have spent 40 years studying the laws that govern how objects move through space. 40 years teaching students that the universe operates according to principles so reliable, so mathematically precise, that we can predict the position of a spacecraft millions of kilometres away to within metres of accuracy. We sent Voyager past Neptune and hit the targeting window. We landed Curiosity on Mars using calculations made years in advance. We navigate the cosmos because the cosmos follows. Broke every single one of them. Let me explain what the geostationary belt actually is, because most people have never had a reason to think about it. 35,786 kilometres above the equator, there exists a very specific altitude where something magical happens, mathematically speaking. At that precise height, an object orbiting Earth completes one full orbit in exactly 23 hours, 56 minutes and 4 seconds. That is the length of a sidereal day. That is how long it takes Earth to complete one rotation relative to the background stars. Do you understand what this means? An object at that altitude moves at exactly the same angular velocity as Earth's surface. From the perspective of someone standing on the ground, that object appears to hang motionless in the sky. It does not rise. It does not set. It simply hovers there, fixed against the stars, as if suspended by invisible thread. Arthur C. Clarke predicted this in 1945, decades before we had the technology to use it. He called it the geostationary orbit, and he understood that it would revolutionize human civilization. He was right. Today, that thin ring of space, 36,000 kilometers up, carries the nervous system of our entire species. Your weather forecasts come from GOES satellites parked in that belt, watching the Atlantic for hurricanes, tracking storm systems across continents. Your television signal bounces off satellites locked in geostationary slots. Your bank transactions, your military communications, your GPS corrections, your internet backbone in remote areas, all of it flows through machines hovering in that narrow band of space where physics allows them to stand still relative to Earth's spinning surface. The United States Space Force tracks approximately 47,000 objects in Earth orbit. Their space surveillance network operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, using ground-based radars, optical telescopes, and space-based sensors scattered across the planet. They know where everything is. They track debris down to 10 centimetres in diameter, roughly the size of a softball. They can predict conjunctions, potential collisions between objects, days in advance. They issue warnings. They coordinate avoidance manoeuvres. And tonight, at 23:58, every warning system they've screamed simultaneously because something appeared in geostationary orbit that was not there a moment before. I need you to understand the physics of what I just said. Objects do not appear in orbit. They arrive, they approach, they follow trajectories that can be calculated and predicted. A spacecraft launching from Earth takes hours to reach geostationary altitude, burning through a geostationary transfer orbit, raising its apogee, circularizing its path. An object approaching from interplanetary space would be tracked for days or weeks as it fell toward Earth, its trajectory bent by our planet's gravity, its velocity and position known to extreme precision. 3i Atlas was 2 astronomical units away this morning. That is roughly 200 million kilometres. That is beyond the orbit of Mars. At that distance, even travelling at extraordinary velocity, an object would take weeks to reach Earth. The fastest spacecraft humanity has ever built, the Parkirao solar probe, achieves velocities around 600,000 kilometres per hour when diving toward the Sun. Even at that impossible speed, crossing 200 million kilometres would take over 13 days. 3I Atlas did not take 13 days. 3I Atlas did not take 13 hours. 3I Atlas did not take 13 minutes. It vanished from deep space tracking at 1100 hours UTC this morning. NASA attributed the disappearance to a sensor glitch. The Deep Space Network reported transponder failures. Official statements mentioned technical difficulties with the tracking systems. 12 hours and 58 minutes later, it reappeared inside our gravity well, inside the geostationary belt, inside the most precisely monitored traffic lane in existence. The math does not work. I keep running the numbers in my head and the math simply does not work. The speed required to cross that distance in that time would require accelerations that would vaporize any physical structure we understand. The energy required would exceed the output of our sun. And even if you could somehow achieve that velocity, you would need to decelerate equally violently to arrive at orbital velocity rather than simply punching through and continuing into the void. But it did not arrive at velocity. That is what the tracking data shows. It did not approach and slow down. It simply appeared. One frame of data, nothing. Next frame of data, object present, velocity matched to geostationary orbital requirements, position stable, instantaneous, as if someone cut a piece out of deep space and pasted it into Earth orbit. I do not have a word for this in physics. I do not have a mechanism, I do not have a theory that allows matter to behave this way. The only framework that even begins to approach this is speculative physics, wormholes, Alcubierre drives, folded space-time geometries that we have never observed and cannot construct. Science fiction concepts that live in equations but have never been seen in the wild, and yet the data says it happened. Multiple independent tracking systems confirm the object's presence. Optical telescopes in Hawaii and New Mexico have visual confirmation. The GODS-S system, the ground-based electro-optical deep space surveillance network, has acquired it. Amateur astronomers across South America, where it is visible in the night sky, are already reporting observations. It is there. It arrived impossibly, and it is not alone in its orbital slot. This is where the situation becomes catastrophic. The geostationary belt is not empty space where you can park anywhere you like. It is divided into slots, carefully allocated orbital positions measured in degrees of longitude. Each slot is separated from its neighbours by precise margins, typically 0.1 degrees or less for station-kept satellites. The International Telecommunication Union coordinates these assignments. Operators pay
Još uvijek se mučite s rezanjem ura.
Satellites maintain their positions using continuous station-keeping maneuvers, tiny thruster burns that counteract the gravitational tugs from the Sun and Moon and Earth's own equatorial bulge. The precision required is extraordinary. A satellite drifting even a fraction of a degree out of its assigned slot risks interfering with its neighbours' communications, or, worse, colliding with them. At geostationary altitude, objects are moving at roughly 3 kilometers per second. A collision would release energies measured in tons of TNT equivalent. The debris would spread across the entire belt. 3I Atlas appeared at 75 degrees west longitude. That is directly over the Americas. That is directly in one of the most densely populated regions of the geostationary arc. And it brought mass with it. I need to be careful here because I'm speculating based on observed effects rather than direct measurement. We cannot weigh an interstellar object from the ground, but we can observe what happens to nearby satellites when gravitational influences change. GOES-19, our newest weather satellite, the final spacecraft in the GOES-R series, went operational as GOES-East in April of this year. It is positioned at 75.2 degrees west longitude, It provides real-time imagery of the entire Western Hemisphere, tracking hurricanes, monitoring severe weather, detecting wildfires. It is one of the most sophisticated weather satellites ever built, carrying instruments that can image the full disk of Earth every 10 minutes in 16 spectral bands. 45 minutes ago, GOES 19 began showing anomalous telemetry. Attitude control systems reported unexpected torques. The satellite's reaction wheels, the spinning masses that maintain orientation, began working harder than their control algorithms expected. Something was pulling on the spacecraft that was not accounted for in its station-keeping models. Galaxy 30, a communications satellite operated by Intelsat, is showing similar behaviour. Its transponders are still functional, but the ground teams are reporting that the satellite's position is drifting in ways that do not match their predictions. And there is a third satellite, one I cannot name specifically, that is reportedly tumbling, losing attitude control. Its solar panels are no longer pointing at the sun. Its antennas are no longer pointing at Earth. It is, for all practical purposes, dead. 3 satellites, 3 highly valuable pieces of infrastructure, all affected within the first hour of 3I Atlas appearing in geostationary orbit. The gravitational perturbation required to cause these effects would be enormous. I keep trying to calculate what mass would be necessary, but the answer keeps coming out wrong. If 3I Atlas had the mass required to gravitationally destabilize satellites at distances of even a few hundred kilometers, it would be large enough to have been detected differently during its approach to our solar system. It would have affected the trajectories of inner planets. It would have been impossible to miss, unless its mass was not there until it arrived, unless whatever technology allowed it to jump across 200 million kilometers also allows it to manifest gravitational effects selectively. Unless the mass is not constant, I do not know. I genuinely do not know. And that terrifies me more than anything else about this situation. What I do know is that we cannot do anything about it. This is the part that has kept me staring at my screens for the last hour, feeling a kind of helpless dread I have never experienced in my scientific career. Humanity has developed anti-satellite weapons. Several nations have demonstrated the capability to destroy satellites in orbit. The United States tested an ASAT system as recently as 2008. China destroyed one of their own weather satellites in 2007. Russia conducted a test in 2021. We have kinetic interceptors. We have directed energy concepts. We have co-orbital inspection and disruption systems. We cannot use any of them against 3I Atlas. Think about what happens if we attack it. Think about the debris. The Kessler syndrome was first described by NASA scientist Donald Kessler in 1978. It describes a cascading disaster. You destroy something in orbit. The destruction creates debris, fragments travelling at orbital velocities. Those fragments collide with other objects. Those collisions create more debris. More debris means more collisions. More collisions mean more debris. The process feeds itself, accelerating, spreading, until entire orbital shells become unusable, filled with shrapnel moving at 10 times the speed of a bullet. A collision in geostationary orbit is different from a collision in low Earth orbit. In LEO, atmospheric drag eventually pulls debris down. Objects re-enter and burn up over years or decades. The cascade has natural brakes. Geostationary orbit has no such safety valve. There is no atmospheric drag at 36,000 kilometers. Debris created there does not decay, it does not re-enter. It remains in that thin ring of space that our civilization depends upon. A single catastrophic event in GEO could render the entire belt unusable for generations. If we launch a kinetic interceptor at 3I Atlas and it detonates and it creates debris, that debris will shred every communication satellite, every weather satellite, every military early warning system, every GPS correction platform in geostationary orbit. We would blind ourselves. We would cut the tendons of our global civilization. It knows this. I keep coming back to that thought. It parked itself in the one place where we cannot touch it without destroying ourselves. It positioned itself directly over the hemisphere with the most advanced space surveillance and space weapons capability. It is sitting in the middle of our orbital infrastructure, using our own satellites as human shields. That is not the behaviour of a rock. That is not the behaviour of a drifting comet nucleus that happened to wander into orbit. That is strategic thinking. That is the recognition of our limitations and the exploitation of them. Whatever 3i Atlas is, it understands us. It understands our technology, our dependencies, our vulnerabilities, and it has placed itself precisely where our strength becomes our weakness. Let me tell you about what the last 6 months have shown us about this object, because the pattern matters now more than ever. 3i Atlas was discovered in July of 2025 during a gamma-ray burst detection campaign. It arrived from the direction of Sagittarius, from the galactic centre, and immediately began exhibiting properties that defied explanation. Its reflectivity is approximately 80%. That is brighter than fresh snow. That is brighter than any natural asteroid or comet we have ever observed. Most space rocks have albedos of 5 to 15%. They are dark, covered in organic residues and cosmic weathering. This thing gleams like polished metal. Its rotation is locked, not tumbling chaotically like every other interstellar visitor we have studied, not wobbling randomly from the accumulated torques of billions of years of gravitational interactions. Stable, controlled, like a spacecraft maintaining attitude. Its coma, the envelope of gas and dust that should surround an actively outgassing comet, is wrong, not diffuse and chaotic like every other comet we have observed, contained, organised, almost aerodynamic, which is a word that should never apply to an object in vacuum. It changed colour, blue to green to gold. The gold is metallic, reflective, stable. No comet chemistry produces that. No ice behaviour explains it. It emitted synchronised signals across multiple wavelengths, X-ray pulses from Chandra data, ultraviolet flickering from Subaru and the Very Large Telescope, all locked to the same rotation period, all regular, repeating, organised, and then, in December, it changed course. James Webb Space Telescope tracked its trajectory through closest approach to Earth. The prediction, based purely on gravitational influences from the Sun and planets, showed one path. The observation showed another. 60,000 kilometres of lateral displacement. Not radial, not simply pushed away from the Sun by outgassing like comets sometimes are. Lateral, sideways. A course correction. Natural objects do not course correct. Rocks follow gravity. Ice follows physics. Only machines, only vessels with purpose and propulsion change direction deliberately. And now it has jumped 200 million kilometres and parked itself in orbit around our planet. I keep thinking about the Fermi paradox. The old question Enrico Fermi asked in 1950. If intelligent life is common in the galaxy, where is everybody? The universe is old enough and large enough that technological civilizations should have spread everywhere by now. Yet we see no evidence of them. The sky is silent. Space appears empty. One proposed solution to the paradox is the dark forest hypothesis. The idea that space is not empty but that everyone is hiding. That the cosmos is full of predators and survival depends on staying quiet, staying invisible, not attracting attention. That any civilization foolish enough to broadcast its presence, to send signals into the void announcing here we are, has signed its own death warrant. What if the dark forest is not hiding predators? What if it is hiding something else? What if the silence is not caution but occupation? What if advanced intelligences do not simply visit star systems but claim them? We have been looking for signals. We have been searching for radio emissions and laser pulses and megastructure shadows. We have been assuming that contact would come as communication, as an attempt at dialogue, as a message we could decode and respond to. We never considered that contact might come as presence. That something would simply arrive and park itself above our cities without asking permission. that the first evidence of intelligence beyond Earth would be an object taking up residence in our orbital infrastructure and daring us to do something about it. GOES 19 is still tumbling slightly, fighting gravitational perturbations that should not exist. Galaxy 30 is drifting. The third satellite has gone silent. And 3i Atlas sits there, golden gleaming, watching us with whatever it uses for eyes. The amateur astronomers are already active. Reports are flooding in from Brazil, from Argentina, from Chile, from anyone in the southern hemisphere with a clear sky and a decent telescope. They describe a bright point of light, magnitude unclear but visible, fixed in position against the stars. Some report colour. Some report apparent structure. Though at this distance, distinguishing real features from atmospheric distortion is nearly impossible. The professional observatories are mobilising. Keck is coming online. The European Southern Observatory has broken from scheduled programmes. Every instrument that can reach that position in the sky is being redirected. And somewhere in classified rooms I am not privy to, military planners are having conversations. I can only imagine. They are looking at an object they cannot attack, positioned in a location they cannot tolerate, exhibiting capabilities they cannot explain. They are learning, as I have learned tonight, what it feels like to be technologically inferior. The Space Surveillance Network continues tracking. They have designated it with a catalogue number, assigned it to orbital elements, begun the work of predicting its future positions, as if this were a normal satellite, as if this were a routine addition to the traffic in GEO, as if the universe had not just demonstrated that our understanding of physics, our models of how objects move through space, our confident predictions of orbital mechanics are missing something fundamental.
Ovo je pametni USB stick za vaš telefon koji može pohraniti 250.
What happens next? I do not know if it will communicate. I do not know if it will act further. I do not know if it will simply sit there, silent and massive, forcing us to accommodate its presence in our planning. Perhaps that is the point. Perhaps the message is not in words, but in position. We are here. We can reach you. We chose to stop, and you cannot make us leave. 12 hours ago, I was worried about the trajectory data from its Jupiter approach. 3 months from now, in March, it was supposed to slingshot around Jupiter, and we were going to see if it made another course correction. That was the test. That was the moment when we would learn if this thing was truly under control, or if the December anomaly was somehow explicable. Now it is 36,000 kilometres above our heads. The test came early. The answer came early. And the answer is worse than I ever imagined. There are people who will tell you this is impossible. They will cite the laws of physics. They will explain why matter cannot move faster than light, why causality forbids the kind of instantaneous displacement the tracking data shows. They will construct alternative explanations, sensor errors, coordinated glitches, some elaborate technical failure that makes the data wrong. I understand that impulse. I share it. I want the math to work. I want the universe to behave according to the principles I've spent my life teaching. I want there to be an explanation that fits within the framework of known physics. But the data says what it says. Multiple independent tracking systems, optical confirmation from ground telescopes, gravitational effects on nearby satellites that cannot be faked, an object that was not there and then was. Either every tracking system on Earth simultaneously malfunctioned in exactly the way required to produce this illusion, or something travelled 200 million kilometres in zero measurable time. Occam's razor tells us to prefer the simpler explanation. I no longer know which explanation is simpler. I keep thinking about what Arthur C. Clarke wrote. Not his scientific predictions, though he was prescient about geostationary satellites and communication infrastructure. His other famous observation, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. What we saw tonight looks like magic. An object vanishing from one location and appearing in another without crossing the intervening space. Instantaneous translation, teleportation, whatever you want to call it. But magic is not real. Physics is real. If this happened, and the data says it happened, then it happened through some physical mechanism we do not understand. There is science here. There is technology here. We just do not know what it is yet. Maybe that is the point. Maybe the demonstration is the message. Look what we can do. Look what is possible. Look at how small your understanding is. The satellite operators are in crisis mode. NOAA is trying to stabilise GOES 19. Intelsat is working on Galaxy 30. The classified systems, whatever they are, have gone dark, which probably means either catastrophic failure or deliberate information lockdown. The entire geostationary architecture is shaking. And there is nothing we can do except watch. Kessler syndrome means we cannot shoot. The physics of the jump means we do not understand what we are dealing with. The positioning means it has strategic awareness of our civilization. The behaviour means intelligence. The silence means we cannot even ask what it wants. I have studied the cosmos my entire life. I have stood in observatories and watched light from galaxies billions of years old. I have traced the mathematics of space-time and marvelled at the elegant machinery of the universe. I have always believed that understanding was possible, that the patterns would reveal themselves if we looked carefully enough. Tonight, I do not feel like a scientist looking at a solvable problem. I feel like an observer watching something that does not care whether I understand it or not, something that has made a decision about our planet and our species and has positioned itself accordingly. 3I Atlas, third interstellar object detected, is no longer a visitor passing through. It has taken up residence. The dawn will come in a few hours. The sun will rise over the Americas and people will go about their days. Unaware that the sky has changed, the news will filter out slowly. Official statements will be measured and careful. Scientists will speak of ongoing analysis and preliminary data and the need for further observation, but the object will still be there, hovering, waiting, using our own infrastructure as a shield against any response we might contemplate. And we will have to live with that. We will have to adjust. We will have to accept that we are no longer alone in orbit around our own planet. I do not know what this means for humanity. I do not know if we are being studied or tested or warned or simply occupied. I do not know if there will be communication or if silence is the only message we will ever receive. What I know is that at 23:58 UTC on January 4th, 2026, the universe demonstrated that it contains capabilities we do not possess and cannot counter. What I know is that the laws of physics, as we understand them, have a gap. What I know is that something intelligent is now 36,000 kilometres above our heads, and we have no idea what it wants. The geostationary belt was supposed to be ours. Our creation, our achievement, the crown jewel of our technological civilization. We put those satellites there. We maintain them. We depend on them. Now we share that space with something that arrived by method. Itself by choice in a location that maximizes our vulnerability. I keep staring at the tracking display, the orbital elements, the catalogue number, as if naming it and measuring its position gives us some kind of control. It does not. 60 seconds ago, the sky became occupied territory, and there is nothing, absolutely nothing, we can do about it except watch and wait and wonder what comes next. The satellites continue to drift. The object continues to hover. And somewhere out there, in the gold gleaming surface of an interstellar visitor that jumped across 200 million kilometres of void, something is watching us learn how small we really are. I want to tell you about what verification looks like in moments like this, because the scientific method has protocols for extraordinary claims, and those protocols are being executed right now, even as I speak. The space surveillance network does not operate on a single sensor. It is a distributed system spanning 25 sites across the globe, radars in Alaska and the Marshall Islands and Greenland, optical telescopes in New Mexico and Hawaii and Diego Garcia, space-based sensors that look down at the orbital shells from above. Each of these systems operates independently. Each has its own tracking algorithms, its own calibration, its own sources of error. When all of them agree, when the data from a radar in the Pacific matches the data from an optical telescope in the Atlantic matches the data from a space-based platform in polar orbit, you are not looking at a glitch. You are looking at something real. 3i Atlas appears in all of them. Same position, same orbital elements, same mass effects on nearby objects. Probability of coordinated failure across that many independent systems producing that precise an illusion is so low it does not deserve consideration. And it is not just military systems. The amateur community is activated. Within 30 minutes of the appearance, reports began flooding astronomy forums from observers across South America. People with backyard telescopes, consumer equipment you could purchase online, pointing at coordinates shared through social networks and confirming, yes, there is something there that was not there before. Different telescopes, different locations, different operators with different biases and different equipment errors, all seeing the same thing. That is how you verify the impossible. Not by trusting any single observation, but by demanding that the phenomenon repeat across every independent measurement you can make. 3i Atlas passes that test. It is there. It arrived impossibly. And every instrument we point at it confirms both facts. The conspiracy theories are already starting. They always do. By morning, there will be claims that this is a government fabrication, a psyop, a false flag, designed to justify some policy or another. There will be people insisting the satellites were always going to fail and this is just cover. There will be people claiming the whole thing is CGI, that no such object exists, that we are being manipulated. I understand the impulse. When reality becomes this strange, when the universe hands you something, this outside normal experience, the brain searches for explanations that fit existing frameworks. Conspiracy is familiar. Institutional deception is something we know happens. The idea that someone is lying to us is more comfortable than the idea that physics itself has presented us with something new. But the data does not support conspiracy. Too many independent observers, too many different systems, too many people who would have to be coordinated in ways that strain credulity. The observation is robust in ways that manufactured illusions are not. Whatever 3i Atlas is, it is there. Whatever it did to arrive, it did it. We can argue about interpretation. We cannot argue about presence. The sun is beginning to lighten the eastern horizon. I can see it through my window, the first pale hints of dawn creeping into the sky. In a few hours, the object will be invisible, lost in daylight glare for observers in the Western Hemisphere. But the tracking will continue. The orbital mechanics do not care about daylight. The radars will ping, and the mathematics will predict, and the catalogue will update. And when night returns tomorrow, 3i Atlas will still be there, hovering at 75 degrees west, watching whatever it is watching, waiting for whatever it is waiting for. I keep coming back to the positioning. 75 degrees west longitude, directly over the Americas, directly over the hemisphere that houses the most advanced space surveillance capability on Earth, directly over the nation with the most developed anti-satellite weapons. If you were going to park yourself in geostationary orbits and you wanted to minimize the probability of being attacked, this is where you would go. Not over the Pacific, where fewer eyes are watching, not over Asia or Europe, where different capabilities exist, over America, over the nation most likely to shoot at you, over the infrastructure that would suffer most if Kessler syndrome turned the geostationary belt into a shooting gallery. Not random. That is not coincidence. That is threat assessment and strategic positioning performed by something that understands our capabilities and our vulnerabilities better than we understand them ourselves. We have been watched. We have been evaluated. And now we are being occupied in precisely the way that neutralizes our ability to respond. I do not know how to process that emotionally. I am a scientist. I deal in observations and measurements and mathematical models. I am not trained for the psychological weight of realizing that something has studied humanity and found our weaknesses. But that is what the evidence suggests. An intelligence that knows where our satellites are, that knows what threatens them, that knows what we cannot afford to lose, that positioned itself accordingly. January 4th, 2026. Remember this date. This is the night the universe stopped being something we explore and became something that explored us. This is the night we learned we are not alone. Not through a message or a signal or a discovery we could celebrate, through occupation, through presence, through the silent assertion of capability so far beyond our own that we cannot even comprehend the gap. 3i Atlas is here. It is not leaving, and we will have to find a way to live with that truth. Welcome to the new era, the era where the sky is no longer empty, the era where something watches from above. I do not know what comes next, but I know we will never look at the stars the same way again. The dawn is coming. The satellites continue their troubled dance around an uninvited guest. And somewhere in the gold gleaming surface of that impossible object, something may be watching this very broadcast, learning how we respond to the knowledge of its presence, cataloguing our reactions as it has catalogued our technology. We wanted to find life among the stars. We searched for signals. We sent messages. We pointed our telescopes at distant worlds and wondered if anyone was looking back. Someone was. And now they are here. Not as visitors passing through, not as explorers making contact, as occupiers taking position. The sky has changed. The rules have changed. And we are only beginning to understand how much everything has changed along with them. 1 minute ago, that is all it took. 1 minute to transform the human story from alone in the cosmos to something else entirely. 1 minute to learn that the universe has plans for our little world, and we were not consulted